Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. This meeting takes place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. Moving on to additions and deletions to the agenda, I'll move over to Paul here for a second.
Thank you, Council. We'll be going into closed session under section 15.1 under personnel matters. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone want to move that? Want to move the agenda with the additions? Moved. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Fullerton. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. Recommendation that committee of the whole approve the minutes from the February 3rd, 2026 meeting as presented. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Fullerton, seconded by Councillor Babineau. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried. There are no presentations. There's really no correspondence to deal with. So we move on to number 8, new business. So the first thing on new business is 9.1, request for direction from community grants policy.
So thank you, Council. Before you tonight is some guidance and requests for our community grants policy. Council had asked us to review this as there has been requests of change and to have some different opportunities to look at. So this was drafted by Jamie Deans, our communication and event coordinator, who's not present this evening. So overall, the community grants were lacking clarity in the processes and assessing grants in the applications in previous years. And then most notably, the establishment of maximums and minimums, if that's what council wants to look at for what's reasonable to request to amount of funding, the intent and purpose of the grant funding, and what are these activities and expenses that are eligible or not eligible for funding. So council, you can continue to read through the discussion piece here. It talks about the grants from 2020 to 2023, where we averaged about 29 grants in 2024 and 2025. Statistically speaking, around you've spent about $20,000 a year on community grants. No, that's exclusionary of like the Lunenburg County Wheels, where that's $10,000 that has been earmarked, or any hospital or engagement processes like that, which we have with the Bridgewater Hospital and the repairs and upgrades that have been going on there. What's been discussed and what's come forward is looking at the establishment of, do you want to have a maximum standard or, an average amount that's been given to organizations based on the calculations of previous years. The average has been about $500 per organization, or give or take, depending on need and want. Some other additional policy options that you have in front of you are like, how do you want to do the distribution of grants? Do you want to create an ad hoc committee of counselors and staff? Do you want to look at eligibility of one grant per fiscal year? So understanding that you may, for an example, give funds to minor sport, but they have a tournament or something that comes up. Do you want to look at when they come for sponsorship? Do we say, do you want to offer them that opportunity, or do you want to look at aspects of, you've already given a grant to the organization, what's fair within that realm? Organizations can make presentations to council if council wants to go in that level as well. And council grants are intended to assist an organization, but not to be the full funds of how everything is operationalized or their ongoing support. So this is supposed to help them with offsetting funds, not to be their sole source of funding. It is recommended when we're looking at funds that council does establish a portion of their funds, example, $2,000, $5,000 for a reserve fund that you get for any requests that come in on a yearly basis. So you've seen several of them that have come in past the grant dates and past the funds come out. You've seen, again, sports tournaments or other individual requests. So it is recommended when you're looking at the budgets here to save money for future requests. Other aspects are, do you want to expand eligibilities to community events? And looking at that is, is it adult events, youth events? Is it other events that are beyond a nonprofit? Those are options and opportunities you have. Establishing clear criteria. There is a level of criteria that's established in the current policy, but you can enhance it if you want. This can be more specific to specific youth programming, adult programming, community events. Again, looking at diversity and of what the community reaches, what's the capacity sustainability. So, and what's their community grant history? How many times have they received funding in consecutive years? What's fairness within council's reach? We need to look at some clarity within the community grants as it's cash-based versus in-kind support. So because in-kind support does have a monetary cost to the town, it really should be noted and understood what the in-kind support is beyond what the grant dollar figure is. So if we're providing a free rental of space, if we're providing something within those likes, it's still a revenue that we're not receiving for, but should be accounted for in some level and fashion. And looking at our existing other supports for community events, it's just listed here that, you know, there are other services and fees that are contributed to the town, such as like what that we don't include in this are like the barricades when we have to set up for events or festivals. There is a whole other separate budget line for that. It's been approximately $8,000 in the budget to support community events. But overall, council, I'll let you read through the rest of the report, but overall, we're just seeking direction how you want to go. There is one other aspect we did note is for post-event recognition that we noticed that the town isn't necessarily recognized when funds are provided from the town to groups and organizations, and it really should be within the processes acknowledged where appropriate on the for the town's contribution, including on events and programs. Through social media posts, signage of letters to council and appreciation that we've noticed that has been not to the same level as it has been in other communities. So reaffirming that if we are providing support, we would like to have our logo shown and that you do mention us in different lights that we have supported the organization or program or event. So I put it back to you, council. This is just seeking direction from you right now on how you would like to proceed with grant options.
Counselor Strong.
Few things to say, and I'm sure others will too, but thank you for looking at this. I think it's great. Compared to what we had last year, just was not working. The composition of an ad hoc committee seems like something that would see us herding cats. To have 3 counselors, a CAO, a member of the community development department, and communication events coordinator is 6 people. I'm not sure we need to have it that heavy, but I am very supportive of an ad hoc community. Otherwise, we might end up where we were last year with a new employee trying to make a decision and not knowing the community. The expanding eligibility to community events to non-registered charities. Can you confirm one way or the other whether we are actually legally able to do that? I think, do you know the answer right now? Okay, I'd just like to know, because I think our applications always ask for a charitable tax number, and I think there must be a reason why that's on there.
Through you, Chair, as well, nonprofits don't necessarily have a charitable number. They have a number, but they can't issue charitable receipts. So I can look at the legalities within that from what council would like to have from charitable versus nonprofit versus other.
I guess what I'm wondering is if it's not something that it's not a registered charity. I'm just curious whether a municipality is able to give discretionary funds to a non-registered charity. That's that question. And then the in-kind support, I think that's great. Does that mean that we could approve a grant in April or wherever it is, and they have to come back to find out whether the in-kind support is available? Like, is that going to be a two-pronged view?
Through you, Chair, it's dependent on what council wants. Preferably, the more we know ahead of time, the more we can budget both in scheduling for blocking out the space or the rental, as well as what we need to know for budget considerations and processes. So the more ahead of time, the better. But not to say that somebody doesn't come back and say something has changed, something is modified. Can we request in-kind support? So leaving the door open isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the more ahead of time, the more we can plan, the more we can budget accordingly.
So that ad hoc committee wouldn't necessarily be deciding that. It would be a request to come back with that request through the CAO, I would imagine. I guess that's it for me.
I just like to add in the in-kind thing. I think it's really important to do with the in-kind grants that we give, that we highlight what the in-kind is worth. I'm really happy to see the breakdown of what we give to community events. It's about $9,500 on that page, because everybody just thinks we put pylons up or, direct some traffic, but it's an actual cost to the taxpayer. And we do it every year annually, willingly. So I think we should let people aware. I think what we did, the way we did you guys did the JCC thing, everybody in the community knows what that value is. We actually didn't give them any money. We gave them a rate discount and the community center in kind, and we put a value to it that everybody was able to see. A lot of times we don't do that. So I think it is important that we put a value on our in-kind gifts. And I mean, I know we've always done it sort of when we sat in the room, did the grants, we said, oh yeah, we can do that. We can hang those flags, but we didn't put a value next to it. I think that should be highlighted. I love the in-kind way to do things a lot of times, because it is overall cheaper for us in the long run. But again, we should be highlighting the value so we get the proper recognition for it, which we've done with the most recent big grant. So again, that would be my 2 cents on the in-kind things. Anybody else? Councillor Daphne.
The committee, I kind of agree with Councillor Strawn. And I was thinking, 3 councillors maybe, and the community events director. Just throwing that out there to everybody. I was kind of leaning more towards the direct monetary grant, but I like what you said. If we get more publicity for the in-kind stuff, that I would go along with that for sure. I still would like to see the applicants come and do their pitch. I think it means, I know to me, it means a lot more if I can put a face to it and actually get them talking about the event. We still have people in the town that don't or aren't aware of all the events that we have. And lastly, to my colleagues, do you think, or how do you feel, 500, do you feel that's too much for a grant number? And I'm looking at it because we're looking at the mill rate. We've increased the power rate. Well, again, the water rate, our reserves are being looked at, et cetera. If we drop it to 400 and we still give out 28 grants, there's 28,000 right there. So I'll just throw that out. You guys can talk about it, but that's what I was looking at.
Thank you. Anybody else? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I have lots of comments as well. I think, I guess because it's fresh, the comments made by Councillor Daphne with respect to $500, I'm wary of putting any kind of parameters on this. I think there are opportunities to where $150 donation can make a significant contribution to a smaller event or a smaller organization or something like that. So I wouldn't want to discourage that kind of support because I think it can go just as far in some cases. But I also think we do need to come up with a number for budgeting purposes. So and it's been stagnant. So I think if we kind of just hold the rate rather than increasing that much this year, we'll be addressing that concern you're speaking to. And so that would be my thought on that particular question. I also, the question of in-kind makes things complicated, and but definitely, we ran into problems, frankly, last year when we were very late and hurriedly trying to respond to the request for grants, and the matrix system that had been put in place was really complicated and a little off base, and we in trying to respond, we didn't do our due diligence, I think, as in determining what in-kind contributions actually amount to. So that had been handled previously by simply getting those numbers in the process of assessing the grants. We can ask our finance staff can come up. They know how many person hours or how much a certain amount of time at a facility costs. And so that actual cost, I think, including that in the figures of grants that are given, addresses that as well. So I was originally going to say, get rid of that part of the ask, because a lot of that asks and in-kinds come through, or additional kinds of in-kind contributions are given through the special events policy, which is another whole policy. So I think it's important for us to look at those two policies together so we understand where they intersect, because they do. There are ways we support other organizations which don't even go through our grant applications, but are supported by the town because we support their special event with grants in lieu to facilitate, moving benches for an event, or putting traffic control in place for a run, or doing a lot of those things. Those are significant contributions, and in some cases mean the event takes place or it doesn't. And so if we can continue to do those things and just sort of recognize what the benefit is, as well as what the the cost benefit is to the community. I think that's important. So I'd like to, when we bring this back to council, I'd like to see that policy put in front of us as well. And the current policy, I think last year we had so much trouble because we were looking at trying to put ourselves into that matrix. And I think that's not actually included in the policy as it exists. So if we just use the policy as it exists and form the committee, that would be my recommendation, that I'd still look at adjusting the policy when it comes back to council in some minor ways, like adding that a committee be an annual thing. And as my colleagues mentioned, I also agree that 6, taking staff time from 3 staff people seemed excessive to me, but certainly staff support would be needed. And just a committee of council to review the application. And that, I guess one of the changes I would like to see, or additions to the policy, would be that we provide just 1 grant per organization per fiscal year. We had more than 1 grant requested from single organizations last year. And I think in spreading the joy and the minimum wealth, that's a fair request. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fullerton.
Thank you. I would agree with a couple of the comments made by others who've spoken before me, and the assigning a maximum to a grant application, I think, is a little, I don't think it's necessary. I think that if grants are awarded at the discretion of a committee that we're planning to form, then if some grants are $250, as the deputy mayor said, and if some are $1,000 a particular year, I don't think it makes much difference, as long as the organizations understand this is their one chance in that fiscal year to be awarded a grant. For the annual events, I agree, they should come regardless, and do a presentation for us. And the thing that I wonder if it would make it easier in a respect of reviewing the grant applications, and it's been a long time since I've looked at the application form. Is there a separate grant
application form for in-kind or cash donations. And if there is a separate way to separate those two, that might make it easier. Because staff could bring back a value for the in-kind donations that are being requested versus the straight cash donations. And I also was glad to see the mention of the special events policy. And I think that's all I had to, oh, the only other thing that I wanted to ask is there an easy way for us to see sort of a reporting from staff for all of the sponsorships, in-kind donations, cash donations that are given through the grant process, just to put in perspective how we are supporting the community in this way?
Through you, Chair. Are you looking for what's happened in 2025, 26?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
that's great.
we can put together a report so that council can see what, everything that's been totaled up.
Mhm.
Because we're coming to the end of fiscal. I'll note there is another request that's come in and you'll see it next week. But we are coming to the end of the fiscal cycle, which would restart your grant request. So we can put together a list of who's been and what's been granted out. Because also even with the special events, we do have the $8,000 budget line that we do allocate for when we do barricades with Public Works. So that we are marking that, but not necessarily like every rink rental is being allocated in the in-kind. So it's capturing that whole aspect, I think, is where I think is a lot of value to council to understand what has been provided within that scope and level. Just before we jump further, I want to go back to one of the comments. When you're talking the smaller group, that's fine. Our hope and goal is that we would share that information with council and staff once the committee is established and has some recommendations, that if there's anybody that has some additional feedback, they can go back to that committee with, so that when a document does come forward to council of the full here, that you guys can review it as whole options. But if you do decide to want to talk further about a particular group or a particular amount, that would have to go into closed session. So just giving you guys the lay of process.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Strong.
Just a concern from a public outside, somebody applying for the grant. Last year we had a number of big anniversary dates that we were supporting with grants, Oak Harbor Festival, the Farmers Market anniversary. Like there was quite a bit of them, and so that sort of pushed us up. So I'd like to see a bullet in there too, though, about special anniversary, so that if somebody's applying, they can see that they fit in that area.
Anybody else? Councillor Babineau.
Thank you. I will just echo some of the other comments that I've heard here. I wouldn't be opposed to putting a cap on it, but I think also like anything that we're doing right now is really only going to help us when it comes up to the next sort of grant cycle. So that's something that maybe could be revisited in the future if we decide that we need to cap that. I know we did get some really large asks last year, like really large, and my only concern with not having a cap would be sort of people's expectations and managing those. But again, not sure that it's 100% necessary at this point. I did just want to mention, because I don't know if anyone else has mentioned it yet, I do like the idea of setting aside a defined portion for last minute requests, because that does happen. Somebody doesn't always know that they're going to need funding in our timeline. I think 2,000 sounds reasonable. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Strong.
Last thing, I promise. Is there an annual date when we send this out to the community, like let them know that they can apply?
Through you, Chair, normally speaking, we normally put this out in February, pushing for the end of March, based on the timelines that I've understood. Last year was a little different due to it all comes down to when budget is also passed. So when that also came into play, budget was late last year, took a little bit more time for the influx and process, and that's why you were awarding grants in August of last year. So normally speaking, it's try to have them in by March 31st of every year. I've even been fielding inquiries, seeing it as, and people seeing this coming up on the agenda saying, is something going to change for this year? What's this looking like? Do we still apply for March 31st? I'd even recommend, because of where we were going with this and unknown direction at this point, that we'll probably push the deadline out to the end of April. So that, and we'll do an education campaign to push that out to say, if anybody is, this is what we're requesting, please submit by this time.
Anything else? I'd just like to add a few thoughts. First, we didn't raise the total amount in the budget that we're giving out for grants, which is a good thing. Even though it's been that amount for quite some time, our budget went from, say, 7 or 8 million to 13.5 million, and we still give out the same amount in grants. So it's not like we're wasting taxpayers' money on keeping on more grants. So I don't think I'd want to put a limit on it, but we have to be careful with that as well. The next question I'd have for my colleagues is, I do like the presentation idea for the bigger asks, but are we going to put like a limit on that? Because we're not going to ask for a presentation for like $150, or are we? Just no. Okay, so we'd have to put a number on that, like whatever that is, like $1,000 or more seems to be out of the norm. So if the norm is $500 possibly, and someone wants 1,000 or 2,000 for an anniversary, then maybe they should come and do a presentation if we put something like that in there. And the matrix that was used 2 years ago, I have no idea where it came from. It was just a dream child of staff at the time, I think, and brought it forward. And believe me, nobody knew what we were doing. We gave money to Bridgewater organizations and everything else. So some groups that asked for 400 got 700, and some groups that asked for 2,000 got 200. So it was a little weird. So anyways, that's really all I have with this. I think it's a good start to a policy. And I think having the special events policy alongside of it and working them together, I think is a good thing. But I do think the one important thing is we have to highlight what we do in this community for not only in-kind and grants, but even when you're talking for certain community organizations that we might do, like grant in lieu of taxes or whatever it may be. I think that's also very important because that all adds up to a total number at the end of the year that would certainly have an impact on our mill rate if we didn't do any of that. So those are my comments for this one. So I think staff has direction.
Thank you, Chair. One question is, because this policy is going to take a little bit more time to revamp and review and bring back to council, knowing that we would like to get the applications out, or at least a deadline, is council comfortable with maintaining the grant policy as is for this year, so we can move forward with it and then start bringing forward the changes again once I have some staff back as well?
Yeah, I think
seeking direction.
I think the policy actually that was passed in 2015 or 16 that's currently in the books. I think that's the one we should be using and going along with that. And, and maybe some of these guidelines that we think we can sort of look at as a committee, like we did last year. The problem is we focused on the matrix, like the deputy mayor said, when we were trying to give out grants, and a lot of it didn't make sense. So I'm okay with going back and using the actual policy that's there for now. Go ahead.
If I could, then I'd recommend that the committee of the whole request change that the community grants policy, which is number 74 right now, that's on the record, continue to be used for this year. But that we move at our upcoming council meeting, that a committee of council be formed to review applications for the upcoming fiscal year.
Excellent. That's just a recommendation to staff. So it's no motion. We can't make motions. So.
Through you, Chair, we'll bring that recommendation for your committee to be formed at the next, it might be the April council, one of the April council meetings. So we'll bring that forward at least for that. But direction has been provided that we'll currently use the policy in place, and we'll revamp as we move forward.
Okay, excellent. So there's nothing more for that. We'll move on to 9.2, which is introduction, updated parking meter bylaw. Shania giving a report, or do we have questions for her?
Through you, Chair, for the parking meter bylaw updates, we're back to council. If you want any additional changes to it, I mean, we've discussed this several times. I believe the changes were highlighted in the bylaw that was presented. So like the daily parking permit, display of parking permits were brought forward at the daily fee. And we had talked about, did we not apply fees for the months of January, February, which we're not seeing uptake basically whatsoever. We don't really start enforcing until March, which again becomes a situation where people actually are coming into town. But I believe we also made the updates already to the parking fees, which was 25. But these were the last discussed changes. So back to you, council. If council is satisfied with the way the bylaw is written as is, the recommendation right now is the committee of whole refers it to the paid parking bylaw to council for first reading.
I actually liked the bylaw the way it's written. I like the fact that we're not going to do like rental spots. We can do a daily fee for certain things like we do now, really, but a little different. But we're not going to give someone like a permit for the year to go wherever they want. I like the 2 30-minute spots in front of Kinley's and the post office. I really like those. I really like the fact that our parking tickets are going up for the first time in 15 years or more, because I think currently parking ticket is $15, but the tickets say 10, but I think our bylaw says 15. Yeah, so I think we're only charging 10 because we must have had 10,000 ticket books left, so we didn't bother to order new ones many moons ago. So I'm glad to see that we're finally raising that. And again, I think I want to thank staff for putting this bylaw together, because I think it does answer a lot of our questions and concerns. And I do think by making the firefighter plate thing of an official exemption in the bylaw is better, because now we've just been doing that for the past number of years. So again, there's a lot of good things put in there. And again, I do like, even when you mention the longer metered times, your recommended areas somewhat make sense, because if you go on the Blue Nose, by the time you go get your ticket, line up, get on the Blue Nose, go on the Blue Nose, get off the Blue Nose, you need 4 hours at least, or 5, right? 2 hours isn't cutting it. So unless you have someone on the land feeding the meter, you're probably going to get a ticket, right? So I do like that part of it. So again, I'm happy with the revised bylaw.
And through you, Chair, remember, we've also included hotspot in this, so it's the digital parking system as well. So for those that are on the Blue Nose and forget, they have that option as well to digital pay within that scope. But we think this staff, and we've reviewed it with staff, traffic authority, basically every department has looked at this, and we feel this is adequate for what's representative of today's standards for parking in Nova Scotia, as well as what's the expectation here in the community.
Any comments? Deputy Mayor.
Just a question on, honestly, about the daily parking permit idea. Is it sort of your, the example given of the longer term tourist kind of excursion opportunity that we were thinking that this may come into play or be most used, or is there sort of other examples that make it make sense?
I think that was the idea of it, was people coming, kind of stay in the day in those certain streets. They could get a day pass to come to town, so they didn't have to worry about the parking fee. We heard a lot of requests, or I heard a lot of requests from the public about parking permits, but they just don't work here for this town and the way the parking works. So we kind of looked at the daily parking permit, which could work. I think it could be successful. And we give it a chance, yeah.
So basically it's for where parking is not metered right now? No.
No, it would more so just be, so it does say under the streets under Schedule A. So I think it's Blue Nose Drive, Pelham, and Montague Street would be the 3 streets that you would be able to buy a parking permit for the day and use it just only on those streets. The other ones with time limits, you wouldn't be able to use it in those areas.
And the fee would be similar to if you fed the meter all day, right? Yeah, so I think the big thing you'll have to monitor closely will be to make sure those daily permits are for what we've intended them to be, and you're not renting out 25 or 30 every day to certain individuals. for staff. So we'll have to watch that very closely. Councilor Babineau.
Thank you. I think this captures like all the things that we've talked about when it comes to this on a couple of different occasions now. But speaking to the daily parking permit, did I not see somewhere that hotspot doesn't support those? So how would people get them?
Yeah, hotspot does support the permit, so it does on the back end of things. I can enter permits, so hotspot would work with that.
Any other comments or questions? Councilor Strong. Okay, Councilor Greek.
Glad I won this race. Yeah, no, to echo the mayor's comments about the tickets, I think it's certainly something that I support to increase them $25. It is a little bit embarrassing right now that the ticket costs less than what you could feed the meter in a day. So certainly on board with that. In regards to having no maximum parking time limit, it does worry me a little bit on, the streets down around the waterfront, the Blue Nose, the Pelham, the Montague, as we've all seen, I'm sure, driving in those areas during the summer. Those are hot commodities, and I just don't want to see where cars, even if they are, feeding the meter and doing it perfectly legally in an acceptable manner. I don't want to see cars staying on end and not allowing other visitors the opportunity to come in and park in those areas. So that's my only concern.
Thank you. That's sort of what I was alluding to too. It's a fine line. I know everybody would like it, and it's very it's good for people that are using it, like, that are here for a day and using the balloons, for example. But it's something that could be abused very quickly if it's not monitored. So that's my warning, because I've seen a number of, vehicles down in that area for a long time.
I think it just comes down to heavier enforcement and better monitoring of those sections.
Councilor Strong.
Last summer I came across some construction happening on Pelham Street, and cars that were used by the construction company being parked on the wrong side of the street. And I'm assuming that goes through a request through Public Works for that kind of longer term bin parking, let's just say.
Through you, Chair, yes, there is a level of traffic authority that comes within that, but if they're parked in the wrong direction, that both falls under bylaw enforcement as well as traffic authority, as well as the RCMP. So we would be trying to crack down a little bit more on making sure people are parked in the right direction, because with one-way streets here in the community and visitors coming, it can create a confusing look and feel. And to be quite honest, even in the wintertime, I've experienced people coming up to be in the wrong direction on a one-way street. So the more we can make sure everybody's following the traffic rules and parking, the better. And that's where education out there when these companies start work is best. And staff, I know, are diligent within that scope.
The only reason I raise this is that in Halifax right now, construction companies cannot get parking without applying for a permit. And I've seen now 2 bins in front of buildings on Pelham Street just set up in the last couple of weeks, but just curious. So there are 2 actually. There's this for enforcing, and then a construction company would go to Public Works and get a special permit.
Yeah, it works, I guess, with bylaw and traffic authority, working together. And they do rent out parking spaces for those purposes. If construction companies do need to put these bins in, they can pay a fee to keep the bin there. I'm not exactly sure what the fee is, but they do have to rent the space to put the bin there. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so there is a recommendation in front of us. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councilor, but you have to read it out, actually.
I would move that the committee of the whole refer the updated parking meter bylaw to a regular council meeting for first reading.
So it's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Fullerton. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Thank you. And thank you very much to staff. It was a very detailed report and it was very easy to understand. So thank you very much, especially after reading the water thing. Now we'll move on to 9.3, introduction and notice inclement weather and temporary facility closure policy.
Thank you, Council. So as you see before you tonight, there's a recommendation for a new policy as it relates to inclement weather and temporary facility closures. So this really came into play more recently, especially with this past winter and the different levels of ice storms, snows, power outages, all the fun that we've experienced this winter. So in discussion with council, you had indicated you would like a little bit more clarity as to the roles, responsibilities of how and when and why we do it. So provided to you tonight is a draft policy that really overviews how we would service the opportunities to work with council and determine opening and delays and closings, as well as within that scope is the actual process from an administrative procedures. How would we as staff communicate that out to the public? How do we communicate that out to our staff? How do we look at things like essential services versus non-essential services? So this area, so like Public Works, obviously, they're going to be in road clearing and doing those levels. But at what level of service becomes a concern of safety when it comes to recreation facilities, when it comes to town hall, understanding water, wastewater, those are essential services. But again, we try to flex as much as we can depending on the level of storms and what's going on, because there is a level of remote sensing that can be done, but again, still need people in some of these facilities to do the work. But also within the scope is that the expectation is in a hybrid work society now is if you can work from home, the expectation is you will work from home. And if not, that you will be using vacation, bank time, or other means, depending on what this is. Could be sick days, but we generally say sick days are meant for sick days, but we do also have limited or abilities to take you can take a day in lieu, so you're not actually being paid for that day if you choose to do so. But again, anybody, and I would say 80% of our town staff have the ability to work from home. That's really, we're talking our frontline attendants and clerks that may not have the access and the abilities to work from home because they don't have the ability to remote in. But for those that can, the expectation is if you're at home, you're still working. So this is basically the outline of what we're looking at. Back to you, council, if you have any questions, concerns on what's being proposed here.
Thank you, Councillor Strong.
I was reading recently that Nova Scotia had the most days off in the winter this year than anywhere else in North America. So I thought I'd just raise that now. So we must have had a really bizarre winter season. There's just a couple of small changes that I would like to see. Employees on leave I think a better way to phrase that is employees on approved or statutory leave of absence. I've got that clear now about the bank time. So we do have bank time policies.
Through you, some of our senior staff do have bank time policy, so we take time in lieu. And so salaried employees generally have, like, we work to a certain level, but so it's 40 hours or whatever the threshold is. I'm not off the top of my head, but like town hall staff, our standard hours are 35. So generally speaking, there's a threshold a little bit above that before we would kick into lieu time and banking that. But you see it more in senior staff or somebody like by law enforcement that might be out on call doing calls and they're balancing their schedule accordingly.
Okay. And I also wanted to point out that I did the attendance of this council for the last year and a half since we've been in office, and it's 100%. And I think that's an important thing to communicate to the community. I do see under 8 that it's going to be you, the CAO and the mayor who will be making decisions. Can you please consider hybrid more often? This is a really, really jam-packed month for council, and I think it's because we had to cancel one meeting, a big meeting.
I think we would have went hybrid to that meeting if it would have been like this meeting or a regular meeting, but we had 2 public hearings that night, some of them fairly controversial. So we figured if we did it hybrid from home, that we'd be, no matter how bad and deep the snow was, we'd have been called out on it. So that we talked about possibly hybrid, but it's hard to have a public hearing of that magnitude hybrids. That's the only reason. I agree with you 100%, but that's why that decision was made, because we happen to have two, what we thought would be fairly controversial public hearings on the things. So all of a sudden we go hybrid, and we just know what socials would do.
Well, hopefully the years to come are not going to be as crazy as this one weather-wise, but who knows? We never know. So that's all I have.
Through you, Chair, just one. So talking with my other municipal colleagues in the county, they've all gone to a hybridized council system in the event of weather and all of that. But I asked on public hearings, I said, any chance you push that, make sure it is a regular meeting where people can fully attend. But our goal would be is if it's an agenda that's similar to what we have tonight and we have to go hybrid, that's very reasonable to do so. We just have to make sure it's well posted out to the public and how they can access the information.
Excellent. So any other comments? Councillor Babineau?
Yeah, just comments, no questions or anything. This all looks good to me. It looks pretty similar to in a number of my workplaces. And I'm actually kind of shocked that we didn't already have one. So happy to see this coming forward.
Well, I'll make a few comments, not real questions, I guess. First of all, the reason there was no policy is because for the amount of years I can remember until basically COVID came along, this building never closed. So when our former long-term CAO was here for many years, if nobody else could get in, she'd walk here and be in here, whether it was 10 feet of snow or 2 feet of snow, and work, answer the phones, take money, do whatever. That was just the way it was, right? So they didn't need a policy. This building never closed. And I will say, my only concern with some of the closures, and it's not really a concern, I thought about it later, but if I wear my former hat as long time ago, 8-9 years ago, as president of South Shore Minor Hockey, the only time South Shore Minor Hockey or any other minor hockey association for that matter cancels their hockey is if the RCMP or whoever make a public statement to stay off the roads. So they count that ice time against the kids' registration, whether we close the rink or not. So in all my years, and I was president for 3 and vice for 2, I only think that our rink might have been closed, maybe 3 times, 4 times in total, because of the fact that it wasn't an emergency or a safety concern put on the media. So I know that a couple of times here we've closed because it's been absolutely terrible. I'll be honest. Right decision was made. I'm not arguing with that. 8 or 8:30, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, it was scandalous. But by 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sort of like today, the sun was out and it wasn't that bad, and the snow was pretty much cleared up. So people in hockey were wondering, because the LCLC was open, because they're a different entity, they're not run by the municipality, right? Chester Rink was open, we weren't, right? So again, I just know, wearing my former hat, how much heat the people involved in social minor hockey would take for that. And I wonder if there's any way in this that we could do, reevaluate everything, because I understand it's a different beast, but 80% of people in this building can easily work from home, or not easily, but they can work from home. The rink staff really can't. So if we close everything down, could we reevaluate again around 2 or 3 and not cancel ice or whatever it may be?
Through you, Chair, not a problem with that. I also know that in some of the instances that we've had, like Public Works still hadn't even gotten to plowing the parking lot, so makes it difficult for staff and the public to get there. But open to any of those suggestions. Even if I'm not mistaken, there was even a reevaluation to bring people back in for noon time, depending on the level and scope. And speaking with the other CAOs around, that was the level of flexibility. And we even talked about it from the LCLC point of view, and just having they had input into what's opening and what's closed. And for the majority of the down times, it was, if the LCLC is closing, everybody else was closing. So I think there was only one day where we had a bit of a difference across all the municipalities, and it really depended on clearing and accessibility to it. But if there's opportunity where we can bring staff back in and run minor sport through the night, understand we don't want want them to count against them. That if it's safe enough to bring staff in, I have no issue with doing that because they're working anyways from 4 p.m. till, or when they come in for their second shift and they're working till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So we do have some flexibility in that light.
Thank you. I just thought I'd bring it up because again, I guess I'm showing my age, but I mean, that's the rink never closed. It was, ever. So I understand it's a lot different. Safety's a much bigger thing than, safety was always a concern, but people didn't realize how dangerous some of the times that I remember traveling to the valley. I probably, if I would think about it now, I'd say I was crazy on a Sunday morning, but that's what you did as a hockey parent. And the only other thing that the last time we closed, and it was scandalous again at 8 or 8:30, I think you guys all talked, and then I went on Facebook and they all had their posts up, and Modal, I think in Chester, closed all day, and TOB and TOM opened at noon, I think. So again, I think the rurals closed all day because they're rural, and the towns opened at noon. We closed all day, which is fine. 'Cause that's probably what you guys discussed earlier, but we might want to follow that because we are a town. The only problem is I do realize that 95% of our staff have to travel to get here, right? But again, I didn't hear anything, but I just sort of noticed it myself when I was checking Facebook. So I'll just bring that up, that maybe a little more aware of what TOB and TOM are doing, because that's who they'll compare us to, I figure. So, anybody else have any? Deputy Mayor.
Just a question about communications and how that's done. I know that there are, again, the people that don't have access to or don't refer to social media platforms. There are still those people who exist. And it does say local radio stations, which I think is great because some of those, those are the folks you might capture. But I'm just wondering where we are with our email lists and if we are at a point, or I know, Jamie Deans has been trying to encourage people and over time. And I just think that's often the most direct way of reaching people if we get up to snuff with that, but in where we were.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Part of it is they do have to sign up because it's classified as spam otherwise. So we don't carry a running list. I know that Mr. Dean's noted that I think we have 150 or 200 plus people now on just the newsletter list alone, not excluding the our electric utility list. But again, we can only do so much with those lists for what the permissions are. To do something at a larger range, it is something that we are looking at as another service that we might be able to provide, whether it's a text message service or something where we can blast out. But again, it would have to be people would have to actually sign up and register. We can't just blank it out. What I will say is we're working well and further with Go Rock and CKBW and their country station for getting our information out on the top and the bottom of the hours. We've also been trying to work with Remo on that as it comes to just if we're in these or not emergency situations, but heavy snowstorms and heavy situations, is how else do we get information out? I've even had staff in town here go and literally tape notices to all the doors of the facility saying we're closed. Here's a way to contact us. Please, follow us on social media or call our after hours line. And it's generally been a pretty good pickup and a response. So always ways to communicate and improve the communication, but we are looking at some additional avenues that will hopefully help us. There's a system that TOB uses just even for general inquiries to our website. And we even started looking at that as how to push more information and more people just to look at our website. And as an example, one of the best tactics we've used to date is the latest update as to what happened with the power outages. Instead of posting that on social media, we put a link there and said, please follow up with this. We had 1,200 hits in under 24 hours to say, looking at our information, reading it over, and that was some of the next biggest hit was last Canada Day. So that's showing even driving people to our website makes a big difference in just notices and information out to the public. So just seeing how public is responding and reacting to our different opportunities.
Well, today, for example, CKW reached out to me because Steve Tanner's a longtime family friend and said, who should I call in town? And we want to do an update on your electrical situation because CKW has changed their business model the last month and they're becoming more back to the community orientated radio station. So he reached out to me and I gave him Paul's number. And so he said he left a message for you. And anyway, so it's good to see that because we were missing that for many years. So now with Go Rock really aggressive and out there, and now CKW changing their business model to a degree, I think that, again, the last time we had a power outage, we were accused of only using Facebook and the website or whatever. And we actually were on the 2 local radio stations every hour, at the top of the hour, every hour. Now, mind you, no radios in my house will work if the power's out. But anyways, it is something that everyone's emergency kit you're supposed to have is a radio that's battery operated. So I'll use my phone. But anyways, so it is good to see the radio stations becoming more and more local and more community minded.
And through your chair, just on that, they actually signed up for the newsletter and signed up for the alerts through our electronic system so that they're completely aware, and spoke with Curtis this afternoon.
Excellent. Deputy Mayor.
Just going to say that you can get the radio stations on your phone.
If it's a snowstorm, I'm not going out in my car. I'm getting too old to drive in the snow. Okay. So there is a recommendation there in front of us. Does someone want to move that recommendation? Deputy Mayor?
I'd recommend that the committee of the whole refer the inclement weather and temporary facility closure policy to a regular council meeting for consideration, and that this referral serve as official notice of council's intent to consider the policy.
So moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Greek. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. So we'll move on to item 10, notices of motions, information requests, and council reports. There is 10.1, direction for council on the proposed changes to the vending bylaw and timeline based on the motion action list. So we had requested this to be brought back to this meeting to give staff more clearer direction on where we want to go with this bylaw. There's a number of options, but it's up to us how we want to proceed at this time. So go ahead there.
Through you, Chair, just to recall, council, if you put it in a motion A, it's within the next 3 months. Motion B is 3 to 6 months, and motion C for that would be 6 months plus, understanding that this is going to take a lot of time to go through this bylaw and the changes, and that you'll want to have large scale consultation with both your business community and your residents. The situation is you are coming into the summer season, and I will just say, with the list of what we have here in the next 3 months on council's docket, I would recommend option A. Option B or C, I would recommend within that scope.
Okay, so any further discussion here by council? We need direction. Who wants to open the floor? Councilor Babineau?
So you're suggesting that we make this priority A or no? Okay, all right. Sorry. I didn't think so.
B or C.
Yeah. I mean, if we're not able to get it up and running for this summer season, which obviously we're not going to be able to, then that does give us a bit of time to consider it for the next tourism season. So what was C again? 6 months or
6 months plus. So that would put us into the fall by the time, we would start to bring that forward as a committee of the whole discussion with changes and modifications. I think there's options that we can, if we at least go into option B, that gives time for staff that probably summertime-ish, we would have at least a committee of the whole report, because it's not just the vending for food trucks or catering vehicles. It really comes down to, there's a lot of other vending within the bylaw. And if we're going to do the appropriate research to see what others are doing or what we feel is comfortable within the scope, I would say at minimum a B motion action list, and we can refer back to council on that. So that puts it between a 3 and 6 month window.
Yeah, I think in that case, probably B, for it to come back to council, understanding that, if we're talking the summertime, we're not going to get much from a lot of the business community in terms of their opportunity to engage with us, because they'll be far too busy, which I know quite well. But yeah, I think B probably makes the most sense. C is probably, we're going to end up cutting it too close for next summer season, I would think.
Councilor Strong?
I think we have to also consider staff vacations, and I'm more inclined to go with C. That gives the whole fall for presentations from the community, and we should have an airtight package ready to deliver in the first of the new year?
I think the big thing is that we're obviously, by the sounds of it, B or C, going to have it in place for this year. So I think the first thing we have to do is let the applicant that present it in front of us and send us the letter know that, and then tell them where we're moving forward. I tend to agree with Councillor Strong that if we really want active engagement from the business community, we can't do it in 3 to 6 months because we're not going to have those public engagements for another couple months with our agendas. Then once Victoria Day weekend goes by, they're into it and they're not going to come to count. They're not even going to follow us for a couple months for the most part. And quite honestly, whoever wants to put a vending anything in the town, once you pass September, they're not interested again for the fall until the following May. So I just think it's important that if we do go with C, that we put like the 12 months would be, we want it done in the 12 months. So that would be next March, which would be give anyone that's going to come here to vend anything plenty of time. But I think in fairness to the applicant, if that's the route we're taking, we should let them know so they can make alternative plans for this upcoming season. So anybody else? Deputy Mayor.
My comment is, I think as has been mentioned, that this is a process. So it's not just where we put it as a priority, but it's the actual timeline of what it's going to take to get it finished. And so my worry would be putting it off to C would challenge staff to get it in place for next summer. So that's my concern in pushing it too far down the road. As my colleagues have mentioned, the timing of engagement has to be when it can happen. And if we, put off till the fall to get started, then that engagement might be quite late in the game and not give adequate time for full consideration. So I would just be inclined to the direction to staff being that we'd like to have at least a serious draft completed prior to the next season, summer full season, and however that can be worked into the priority list would work for me.
Through you, Chair, just within that concept, again, what we're saying is like if you say B 3 to 6 months, that means within 3 to 6 months, we'll have a report to council for consideration of items for changing into the bylaw and would start that as the committee of the whole. It might take a couple of committee of whole meetings depending on the level and scope, but that doesn't mean that in August you couldn't be doing the committee of the whole. In September, we could get further direction committee of the whole. By October, we could be starting public engagement and process. So very similar to how the marketing levy went this past year. I could see a very similar timeline of events. And I mean, I'm pretty sure we just passed the marketing levy. So I put out the notices and we passed it at the last meeting. So if like you did with the marketing levy, you set the expectation of when it's going to activate. So if council wants to say information to us within the next 3 to 6 months to start the serious draft, but a completion and wrap up by March 2020, by the end of March of 2027. So it's activated for the following season. I think that's a reasonable enough timeline for us to at least come through the processes, have the consultations with those who wish to be engaged in the fall and winter season to roll out for spring of next year.
Yeah, so we'd be putting it in B then, if that's the direction you want. I just think that putting it in B or C is the way to go because we cannot rush this bylaw. We all remember, unless you weren't living here, you all remember about the meetings 3 years ago next month. We don't want a repeat of that. And I don't think this is an emergency. Like for us as a community, there from Foodland to the Knot, there's 26 actual physical brick and mortar eating establishments, not counting the 1 or 2 that's going to open in the town parking lot this summer. So that'll almost be 30 in probably less than a kilometer. So I do hope we can come with a vending bylaw that gives people the opportunity to do vending in town. But again, it has to be done with engagement. It has to be done properly. So if you want to put it in B or C, I'm fine either way. So if the majority are okay with B, that's the direction we're going to give staff? Everybody good? Everybody good with that? Okay, B it is. Okay, thank you very much. So now, where it's a committee of the whole, we can do council reports if we want, but we usually use those at council meetings. So do you guys want to do a report? Anyone have anything to? Anyone, everyone good or? Okay, so then a motion to move into closed session. Moved by Councilor Babineau, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Take a 2-minute break.